Thanks very much, and I'd like to get the discussion going now. And I'd like to start by bringing up this question, this very interesting question that Robert Kagan just raised of, is this nation building or not that we are up to now in Afghanistan? Dr. Nagel, I'd like to ask you about this because you spoke in your remarks about minimalist goals, about achievable goals, and certainly that's the rhetoric we've been hearing from the administration. And in his speech last Friday, President Obama laid out what sounded like a pretty minimalist goal, which is simply to prevent al-Qaeda from becoming entrenched again in Afghanistan, or the Taliban from taking the power again. And yet, I spent last week in Afghanistan myself, and when you talk to the commanders there, it's very clear that they have completely imbibed and absorbed the counterinsurgency strategy that you helped to author, which envisions getting to a goal like that by building governance, by reforming the Afghan economy, by having a completely more, a revamping of aid programs that takes a much more comprehensive approach, by conducting a whole lot of what sounds like nation building. And it seems to me that what commanders there have come to understand and what the administration seems to have incorporated into its strategy is the idea that if you want to achieve the minimalist goal of preventing al-Qaeda from coming back, you have to, in fact, take on the rather maximalist task of nation building. Is that right?
I think there's great truth to that, Jackson. The fact is that we can accomplish our more minimalist goals of preventing Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven for terrorists without accomplishing the goals of nation building or comprehensive counterinsurgency, but only as long as we stay there. So as long as the United States is prepared to have a permanent commitment, permanent troops inside Afghanistan, we can accomplish our counterterrorism objectives without conducting nation building. If we ever want to leave, we're going to have to build an Afghanistan that can accomplish those goals on its own. And the primary component of that, the primary component of building an Afghan state that can secure itself is going to be an army, and we need to then build, frankly, an Afghan government that is worthy of its army. The Afghan government, the most effective, best respected institution in that country. That's a long-term project, but these are long, hard wars, and so the politically unpalatable words of nation building, I think, are being disguised by what is in essence a long-term commitment to do that. And let me push back a little bit against Bob, if I can, on the international role. I believe that both the Brits and the Australians are likely to increase their commitment. It may be advisors rather than so-called combat forces, but as those who advise know, that looks an awful lot like combat. The Canadians have a higher casualty ratio per soldier deployed than the United States does. The Dutch have also performed remarkably well, and you always hate to credit anyone because you then by implication, to integrate the efforts of the 41 other countries, the 41 total countries involved in this effort. And I think it's important to think of Afghanistan and Pakistan not just in light of those two countries, but also in terms of this broader war, what we are now calling overseas contingency operations. Apparently, I still prefer the phrase the long war. I'll admit to never having been a fan of the phrase global war on terror. But if in fact we continue to be confronted by al-Qaeda and its affiliated movements, which remain dedicated to doing us and our friends harm, and I strongly believe that is the case, then the fact that there are 40 countries engaged in an effort against that is incredibly important, regardless of the material contributions those countries make. And some of those material contributions are more significant than others. All of them are significant. But in terms of winning this global narrative, I think that it is incredibly important that we have that many countries engaged in this effort with us. I do agree that increasingly Americans are going to bear a higher percentage of the total weight, but to quote someone who will probably not otherwise be quoted here, from each according to his abilities. We all have a role to play in this fight, and I also believe that the President is going to ask for more, and it's going to be very hard for our allies internationally to say no to this President when he asks for more in what I really believe is a global struggle.
Well, Robert, you may want to respond to that. And I also just want to ask, just again following up on this nation-building discussion, if what we're really doing there is nation-building, is it politically smart to pretend that that's not what we're doing?
Well, in answer to the on the Allied question, as I say, I'm comfortable with what the Allies are doing, and I totally agree that it's important to maintain as much of an international element to this for all the reasons that you stated, and I hope that your line will be repeated early and often by the administration, even if the Allies don't quite cough up everything we want, just so we can maintain basic support in the United States. But I was recently at a meeting at the Brussels Forum in Brussels where the German, one of the senior German officials got up and said, well, the Germans have been in the North, and the North is now completely pacified. And the audience, which was almost entirely European, laughed like that, and he didn't mean it as a joke. So some of this is a German problem, obviously, and in the sense that I think that's the country that people are looking at and maybe forgetting about, as you say, the role of the British and the Australians and others, which has been significant. So on the nation-building question, there are people who are in the White House being paid to make smart political decisions, and I'm not prepared to. I know that there's been a fair amount of criticism, and I tend to be concerned that you're doing one thing and you're selling something else. On the other hand, let me make the argument for this tactic. The thing that they're selling is not insignificant. If they're saying to the American people, this is about Al-Qaeda and not getting hit again, you can sustain that for a long time. So that even if you are in fact engaged in a nation-building exercise and you're calling it a narrow anti-Al-Qaeda exercise, that might be enough. I think they found the point to make that is not easily dismissed by the American people. So as long as he keeps making that point, which by the way is going to make him, as it already has, raise the political salience of what the war formerly known as the War on Terrorism, that will have interesting implications on other issues as well. I think that's interesting. I think that you sometimes got the feeling during the campaign that had this administration had its druthers, it would have shifted emphasis dramatically to something else. The need to put more to do what he's doing in Afghanistan has forced him to put Al-Qaeda front and center again in a way that I'm not sure was what they had in mind. I think that's a good thing. And I think so. It may, in fact, be sustainable.
I just want to follow up on the politics of this a little bit. Another thing I heard when I was in Afghanistan was a lot of concern among U.S. commanders, U.S. civilian professionals about how sustainable the bipartisan political support for this was going to be in the United States. I heard one person say that, he had been warned by a senior Republican senator that this year the war in Afghanistan is a bipartisan war. Next year, it will be Obama's war. And particularly in 2010, if we are continuing to see heavy fighting, heavy casualties during the summer season, which frankly many people expect that we will, that will be the time when Republican senators who used to support this war and who supported the war in Iraq will suddenly decide that this is Obama's war and that he's messing it up. Is that something we have to be concerned about, do you think?
I think it's something we have to be concerned about. And again, I think they might find some allies, even in the Democratic Party, and certainly you might find some in the Democratic Party saying we've got to get off of this issue because we don't want to run on this issue in 2010. There's also the danger of preemptive political surrender, which is that in the face of a potential backlash, you begin to pare back. Look, in the Iraq context, Republicans on the Hill were very shaky at themselves, not wanting to run on this, and some of them, it turned out, with good reason, not wanting to run on it. And so, politics does come to play, and I guess, about that potential development. The stronger we can build a consensus in favor of the continuing commitment to Afghanistan now, the less likely it will be for people to fall off later, I think.
John Noggle, you've got a lot of friends in the administration. How solid is the support for the strategy of counterinsurgency for fixing Afghanistan as opposed to, say, counterterrorism? We hear a lot that there are people in the administration, perhaps including the vice president, who would prefer not to go the route of counterinsurgency.
The extraordinary thing for me on Friday, and I don't think the television camera showed this particularly well, but the president had his entire national security team behind him when he gave this speech. General Jones, Bruce Riedel, Michelle Flournoy, my former boss, Secretary of Defense Gates, Secretary of State Clinton, all behind him, shoulder to shoulder. And the statement was, I thought, very clear and very unmistakable. The president, very resolute, and he committed his administration to this fight. This was an all-in statement. I do not believe that this administration will waver, and I do think that meetings like this, gatherings like this, bipartisan groups of people dedicated to the security of the American people, the defeat of our enemies around the world, really truly matters. So I think forming there used to be a bipartisan consensus in this country on foreign policy, in particular when we have our sons and daughters at war, and I'm hopeful that events like this will contribute to that, and that's why I'm so proud to be a part of it. The people I talk to in the administration understand counterinsurgency. They understand that the long-term objective has to be building in Afghanistan and a Pakistan even more difficult that can secure themselves. They understand how long and how hard that effort is going to be, but they understand that there simply isn't any alternative if we are ever going to withdraw ourselves in large numbers from this conflict zone that presents what to me is the most clear and present danger to the security of our country. So I think they understand all that. I'm not. I think that there is perhaps some unwillingness to talk to the full extent of the time commitment that's likely to be required for this. But as an initial statement of resolve and determination, I thought it would have been hard to beat what the president did on Friday.
Well, there's lots more questions, but I see we have a huge number of really expert people in the audience here. So I want to open it up to questions from the audience. There's going to be a roving microphone, and the only thing I would ask is that before you ask your question, you simply identify yourself. Who would like to go first? No? Oh, here we are. No, thanks.
Hi, my name is Demetrius Karoutsos. I'm with Global Political Strategies. I was formerly the country director for the International Republican Institute in Afghanistan, and I have a bit of a cough. My question is regarding the upcoming presidential elections in Afghanistan and the potential, both political in the United States and strategic on the ground ramifications for the Obama administration. Regarding the question of do we support President Karzai or do we look for someone else, especially when with all of the current president's shortcomings, most of the presidential candidates that are being talked about have some pretty visible warts. Very curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on both the upcoming elections, but more specifically what the ramifications could be for the Obama administration.
John Noggle, when I was just there, just to add to that, I heard a lot of paradoxical things about the election. People seem to say that, on the one hand, Karzai is quite unpopular in many parts of Afghanistan because people blame him for government inefficiency and corruption. On the other hand, he's likely to be reelected, and Afghans are likely to blame us for the fact that he gets reelected if we don't appear to back anyone else. How do you manage this kind of problem?
Anyone who's married knows that it's always your fault. I'm going to get in trouble for that. Mm-hmm. So definitely. Bob talked a little earlier about democracy, and it's worth pointing out, I think, that the administration just committed $40 million to assist in the Afghan presidential elections, and we're expecting $160 million from other countries to help with that. This election, to coin a phrase, is an accountability moment. And we're either going to see, I believe that there is going to be a real election. There are real candidates lining themselves up. There are going to be real alternatives to Karzai. The Afghan people I've spoken to, when I ask them who's likely to be elected the president, they always say whoever the United States picks. So we're having, I talked about the human infrastructure problems a little bit. It's a little hard in some cases to get them to understand that it really is their choice. We really do mean that. I believe that either President Karzai will improve his performance, which has been lackluster to say the least, universally derided as the mayor of Kabul. He will either improve his performance over the next 3 or 4 months through the summer, or he will not be reelected. But I don't believe the United States is going to put its thumb on the scales. I think that they will be, as the elections will be as free and as fair as they can be in that troubled country. The 17,000 troops are going to primarily provide security for the elections. That was the reason why they had to be, their deployment process had to start before the completion of the Afghan strategy review. And so whether we have Karzai or whether he is replaced, I believe that it will have to be a better Karzai if he is to be reelected, or I think there are other credible candidates. I was honored to chair Defense Minister Wardak at a press conference a month or two ago, who has obvious credentials and a lot of credibility. Ashraf Ghani is a man who has the intellectual capacity to do a lot of the technical responsibility. So I think there are credible alternatives, and I really think it's going to be up to the Afghan people to decide, although convincing them of that is going to be a real trick.
Robert Kagan, we found ourselves in this situation before.
Many times.
El Salvador, Vietnam, Iran. How do you manage this situation where either we pick somebody or we don't pick somebody, and we avoid being looked upon as the puppet master either way?
In countries where the United States is deeply involved, it's impossible not to look like the puppet master unless your worst enemy gets elected. I mean, and finally we've achieved that in El Salvador. We have the FMLN. It just took a while to validate the true democracy that was established in El Salvador. I actually mean that sincerely. And so if the Afghan people are going to assume that whatever happens in these elections is what we wanted to happen, and I think that there's nothing we can do to avoid that, and I'm not sure we should bend over backwards to try to avoid that unless we really were prepared to pick a different candidate, which I think it's too late to do now. I mean, to pick a candidate. So I would say I agree with John. I think that our obligation at this point is to try to make sure that the elections are as free and fair and as certified as free and fair as possible. Whoever wins, wins, and then whoever wins, if it's Karzai or somebody else, is going to have to deal with the problems and may be the beneficiary of an improved American strategy, in which case, a lot of the downside of having Karzai, if it is Karzai in power, may be mitigated.
Right. Yes, sir. We have a microphone. Yeah, here it comes.
My name's Philip Constantino. My question is, you've talked about the very narrow counterterrorism goals in Afghanistan and slightly the broader counterinsurgency goals, but could you talk a little bit briefly about how Afghanistan fits into the security goals of the United States sort of in a global way? Is there something to be gained by being determined or sort of leaving as soon as possible?
Want to take that?
By leaving as soon as possible? Is that the...
Just to say, to what should we be thinking about the way the rest of the world will view our prestige or commitment if we're very, publicly willing to accept that we will leave Afghanistan as absolutely soon as possible, regardless of what our objectives are?
Important to talk, I think, about the popularity of the United States in Afghanistan. We've fallen dramatically, but we remain above 50% approval ratings in Afghanistan. That exceeds President Karzai, who's in the single digits, and the Taliban, who are also in the single digits. So the Taliban, not a popular alternative, In Afghanistan, the Afghans I've spoken to aren't upset that the United States is there. They're upset that we don't stay and we're not there in sufficient numbers. And I think we're likely to start changing that. But so certainly in country, there's no hurry for us to leave. They'd like more ground security, particularly more provided by Afghans, and fewer airstrikes. And I feel the same way about my neighborhood. Important as well to note that Peter Bergen had a good piece over the weekend. Afghanistan is not the graveyard of empires. That it has been pacified before. They tend not to respond well if you sow landmines designed to kill their children. As my neighborhood would also agree with that philosophy. But in fact, there is widespread appreciation that the United States is trying to help and to try to do the right things. The real danger here, and the reason Afghanistan is so important. In Afghanistan, it's an extraordinary moment. This doesn't happen that often, but American interests and American ideals actually both go the same direction in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Right? So we're fighting a horrible enemy who does horrible things, while Cliff May and I were in Afghanistan in November. Was when some Taliban, I'm blanking on non-expletives here, sprayed acid in the faces of some girls who were going to school. So we have almost a cartoon enemy who is so horrible, who does such horrible things, that it's really hard to argue that we should not be there for humanitarian reasons to help this godforsakenly poor country, fifth poorest country in the world, just devastated by 30 years of war. But American national interests also demand that we be there. A stable Afghanistan does not guarantee a stable Pakistan by any means, but an unstable Afghanistan does contribute to instability in Pakistan, and instability in Pakistan, of which there is already a surplus, is not something we want to encourage, and frankly not something the international community wants to encourage. So I actually think we're going to see an increased international commitment. I think the Obama strategy announced on Friday, already recognized with some approval by President Karzai, will achieve an awful lot of international consensus. And so I don't think there's going to be extraordinary international pressure for us to leave soon. I also think events like the more you know about Afghanistan and Pakistan, the more the American people know, the more committed I believe they will be to a continued American presence there for what I believe is going to be the decade that's going to be required to stabilize that region.
Well, I think, this is true in both Iraq and Afghanistan. However anxious or unhappy much the world may be about our continuing presence in these places, will be less than their anxiousness and anxiety and anger after we pull out and leave them to blow up into a million pieces. And so let's not overestimate the pleasure that will be gained if we withdraw from Afghanistan prematurely and it becomes an al-Qaeda base again and becomes a Taliban disaster area again. The world will not be grateful. And so I think we have to just bear the burden of world unhappiness with some of our actions without kidding ourselves that the world will thank us if we leave them in a mess.
Well, on that cheerful note, I think we've come to the end of our time for this panel, but there's much more discussion to come. So thank you very much to Dr. John Noglin, to Robert Kagan.